Is there a better time of year for sports, legitimately? It is March Madness season. It is bracket season. We got baseball around the corner. We're going to cover all that. We are going to talk about the Big Ten tournament champion, Michigan Wolverines, and their draw in the NCAA tournament here. Just a second. Tony Garcia of the Detroit Free Press will be joining us to discuss all that. He's done a wonderful job covering both Michigan football and basketball over the last several years. Can't wait to pick his brain about some things. He's been locked in, man. He was great the last time we had him on in the middle of football season. We are going to ask him some football questions as well, talking about year 2 of the Sharon Moore era. But yeah, really looking forward to that. Before we jump into it, though, a few programming notes. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Comment, let us know what you think of the show. If you want us in audio format, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. And if you want to find all of our content, you can go to castellanicontent.com. Everything is there. One-stop shop. Sorry, I should know this by now. My apologies. For everything that we create, beautifully organized. And like, for instance, we're 34 games into this Michigan basketball season. You want to get caught up on all the Michigan basketball post games? They are all on one page in chronological order. You can kind of follow along with the journey. So I appreciate it. And yeah, I think that might be record time to get the plugs out of the way. Castellani 2014 on Twitter. You guys know this. And you find the link tree and all that stuff is there. Shout out Austin for putting this stuff together. Let's jump right into it, man. This should be a fun interview. Let's get to it. Welcome Tony Garcia, his second appearance on Chris and Company. Tony Garcia of the Detroit Free Press, second time that he has been on the program. First time we primarily discussed Michigan football, but we did end that show at the very end by talking about a little bit of Michigan hoops. And you said some stuff, and I'm going to have to cut it and post it to give you credit, because you said some stuff that was pretty prophetic regarding, you said we were going to have some fun this year. We have. This team has been a little bit of everything, and I obviously appreciate you joining the show in what's been a very hectic week. You're coming off of covering a Big Ten tournament championship run in Indy. And I'll just jump right into it with a question that I don't know if I've ever asked anybody, but what is this team, Tony? Because like I said, they've been a little bit of everything this year, and they're coming off of what is an actual championship run. I mean, a Big Ten tournament championship run. And yet I still find myself trying to keep arm's length in regards to expectations. Just talk about where you think this team is at following a very hectic last month.
Yeah, well, first, Chris, thanks for having me on. Appreciate always joining. When we were messaging, lining this up next week, right, and last week, I should say, we were talking about, what the vibes might be. We said the job in Indy was to flip the vibes. Then you messaged me last night. The vibes have been flipped. They have, and so I'd say that's what this team is. This team is back to the team that it was for much of the season, which is a very good team, a fun team, a talented team, but one that still does not have a ton of margin for error, right? If you turn the ball over a lot, if you don't shoot it all that well from three, and if you're not elite on the boards, those are where 3 points gets you 3 points is worth more than 2. Turning it over is the way to lose every game, and rebounding is how you extend things when you miss a lot, right? And so if you don't do any of those things particularly well, it's hard to score a lot. But by shooting it, by living on these true outcomes, right? Layups, dunks, free throws, and threes, they still are so efficient when they do get shots off that they're able to outscore most teams, right? And it's a solid defense. It's not great, but it's good. And I think that's what this team is. It's a very good team that can beat anyone, but if it's not playing well, will not. I know that's not a sexy answer, but it's after true. 34 games, it just feels like that's what this is.
No, they are what they are at this point. And no, that's true. I think defensively, it's bizarre defensively where I agree they're good. I think they're capable of being great. Yesterday, that was on full display. Just a wonderful job against Wisconsin. I know, Wisconsin was having an off day, but they were forcing them to shoot shots at the perimeter, and even down low, I thought that they were great all game. But, you bring up the issues that it's so strange, man, because watching the Cleveland State game 1, I'm like, I think this is going to be a pretty good team. They might have some issues with turnovers, might have some issues with free throws, and it's been there all season. I guess I want to start with the turnover problem because I'm going to go back to last year. I'm going to make a Tigers analogy here when I talk to AJ Hinch. I know obviously you're a big Tiger guy. And I asked him about Javi Baez, and he brought up the fact, he's like, look, Javi's going to swing and miss. Okay, that's just kind of his identity as a player. We're not going to try to get him to be Juan Soto. And the reason I bring that up is I feel like at this point, part of Michigan's identity as a basketball team is just the turnovers. Like, you just kind of have to expect there's going to be sloppy basketball played at points. Is it one of those things where they have made an attempt to try to limit the sloppiness and it just hasn't worked? Or is it something where they've just kind of accepted that this is part of the identity of this team? This is part of the pace that they're going to play at, and they just have to accept it. I
like the analogy, and that's a really good question. And I think it's both. Early on, Dusty was really hammering the turnover fact. He's like, we got to clean it up. We got to clean it up. We got to clean it up. And then it got to the point where they just focused on it so much, it was just overwhelming them. It became all encompassing. And they had to get to the point where we're like, look, we just need to let's work on some other things, and that will either come or it won't. And if you remember, I mean, as I know you obviously do, they were 20-5 in mid-February when they were turning it over left and right? And they were still beating good teams and winning a lot. So the turnovers was kind of something that they actually were able to consistently overcome time and time and time again. It was when the 3-point shooting dipped over these final 14 games that you can't give away possessions and miss from 3, right? Because then it felt like the only option for so long was just dump it down to Vlad. And then you're getting 2 about 70% of the time, 75% of the time, but you're not getting offensive rebounds. You're not swinging the ball. Other people aren't getting to the flow. It's very stagnant. And so I think turnovers is something that this team has had to accept, that it is part of the flaw. And that, I wonder, I mean, this is still year 1 under Dusty May, so we're going to need a few more data points in some years to see if that's just a thing that happens. But Dusty is not this is my point guard, we are going to run through him, and someone who I trust to always make the right decision. This is a free-flowing offense. You're running 4 or 5 ball screens, handoffs, pick and rolls, baseline dives, back cuts. There's a lot of movement. And a lot of this is based on trust and thinking a guy's going to be, and sometimes there's just a miscommunication. Sometimes it passes a little too hot, what have you. And so this is a team that plays quickly. When you play quickly, you're going to turn the ball over a little more. It's a team that's still in its first year together. It doesn't have a primary point guard. And at times, asking Danny Wolf to be this facilitator and this guy who puts the ball on the deck, he's perfectly capable of it, but he's never had quite this much freedom, which sounds surprising given that he was the guy at Yale and it's like, hey, just go do the thing. But he's never had this much level of trust, and there's been a give and take about who is running the offense, who's making the passes. And so it just, I mean, I think to make a long answer very long, it's something that the team has just had to accept. It is what it is. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it wasn't impacting the final score until the last few games of the season, where it was just like, I mean, yeah, like you said, they were 20-5. I mean, they had these turnover issues and still went to Kohl Center and won. They still went to Pauley Pavilion and dominated. Now, the other part that you brought up, and I'm glad you did, because it was going to transition to my next question, is the dip in 3-point shooting, because this is one of those weird things, and I've talked about it a little bit with Michigan State as well, where I know this team has good shooters. I know this team has guys that can shoot. And yet in Big Ten play for, pretty heavy majority of the conference schedule, they were a well below average 3-point shooting team. I guess, was it water finding its level, or where did this regression come from? Because I feel like it doesn't make a lot of sense, because I think there's good shooters on this team. Yeah. That's the question I'm still trying to figure out. Yeah. So I wish I had a little bit better of an answer for it. I don't think that they were just shooting like beyond belief early and that this is their true level. I don't think that. I think this is worse than their true level. I would agree. But I think earlier was probably a bit high. I think it was a little high. And then let's take a look at the nature of some of these non-conference teams that they thought were going to be decent. Wake Forest, not great. TCU, not great. Arkansas, Oklahoma, not great, right? And then when you start on the West Coast trip, UCLA was floundering at that time. USC, not great. Washington, not great. Western Kentucky and IUPUI or whoever, Purdue, Fort Wayne, whichever one of those random Indiana schools it was. That was this December to January 10-game run where the offense was just firing on all cylinders, right? And so I think if you are and something Dusty does an awesome job of is being very critical, being very self-reflective, and making sure that they are a phrase he likes is identify problems before they come. And that's something that the staff tries to do. I think that Michigan was, it feels fair to say that a product of it was the talent. The teams they were playing were not as good defensively. The 4-5 pick and roll was earlier. There wasn't as much tape on it. Teams didn't know quite how to stop it. After a 20-game slog in the Big Ten, you're gonna shoot worse at the end of the year. Michigan State might be kind of an anomaly there, but that's just because they were so bad early. By definition, they had to go up, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like they're shooting the lights out at 34% or whatever. So I think Michigan just their schedule got tougher. Teams kind of figured them out a little bit. And then guys got in their head. Ronnie Gale, yes, he hit one in Indy, but he missed 18 straight. He went 1 of 26 for 2.5 months, right? Reuben Jones, who's a 40% shooter at North Texas, is now 25%. Danny Wolf's shot left him. Vlad Golden, after he was hitting some threes, he went 0 for 1, 8 games in a row. LJ Kaysen, awesome time for him to hit a couple against Wisconsin. But he was 2 for 17, 1 for 17 for a month and a half. Like, everybody just lost it simultaneously. Trey Donaldson, who was shooting 43% for 2.5 months, he was down in the 20s, right? Yeah. And so it was a confidence thing. It was a snowball thing. It all kind of worked together as I see it.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads me to this run that they had in Indy because, like you said, we went back and forth about the vibes need to be flipped. My whole thing was, I know that really good team is in there. I came into the weekend saying, give me one good 40-minute game. Like, I play well against Purdue so I can breathe that sigh of relief to know this team still exists. Obviously, they kind of caught fire. Great game against Maryland, and then they win the rock fight yesterday against Wisconsin. I guess the big question that people are asking is what went right in Indy that wasn't going right in the last 2 weeks of the season?
They got to focus on themselves. Is how the team explained it to us. Because as you recall, to end the regular season, they had 5 games in 13 days. Yeah. They played Illinois, and Maryland, and Michigan State, obviously, right? And then Rutgers and Nebraska were also in that mix as well with a road trip out to Nebraska. So with 5 games in 13 days, it was game plan, game plan, right? And then there was no looking internally, no reflection, no like, hey, this is what we need to work on, right? They were just constantly installing the next film from the next opponent. And as you're slumping, there's no they were so focused on what everyone else was doing, they stopped looking and honing in on themselves. So this last week in practice, they had multiple sessions where they were limited to one dribble. You are not allowed to dribble twice. One dribble, pass, move the ball, get it swinging again. Stop being stagnant. Let's get our motion back. And then also they just doubled, tripled, quadrupled down. You can't exaggerate it on physicality. 47-18 against Maryland on the glass. I would have been I can't even express how out of left field that was.
I know.
Michigan had as many offensive rebounds as Maryland had rebounds for a game. And this is respectfully, a very average rebounding team. Michigan does a lot of things really well. Rebounding is not one of their strengths. They're fine. They're not great. This weekend, they were physical as hell. And then I think if we're doing a proper service as Michigan watchers, media, fans, supporters, whatever, you have to look at this through the most objective lens possible, right? That's how you don't get led astray going forward. And I've tried to be very dialed on this team the whole way, both good and bad. I would be concerned, they're hanging a banner, and that's best. That's fantastic, and that will never not be the case. But I'm still a little bit concerned over the last 2 days, over those final 2 days. And you want to just enjoy it. And in this next tournament, it does not matter at all how you win. Period, point blank. It is only win. But if you're blowing a 15-point lead against Maryland, you're turning the ball over 19 times against Maryland. They had no timeouts, and they needed a coast-to-coast lefty finger or everyone would be talking about this differently. And if we're being truthful, Wisconsin was on its fourth game in 4 days.
Right.
They had absolutely no legs. John Tonji went 1 for 15. Credit to Reuben Jones and Namari Burnett, but nobody can lock Tonji down to 1 for 15. That is as much on him as it is on the defense, right?
Agreed.
And so so the vibes were flipped. And so I think it's really their confidence that they got back. I don't know those last 2 games, how much better they play. Like a lot for portions of it, certainly they played better than the last 2-3 weeks. But I don't think they found some new level where they're just like surging or anything. I think they're back to what they were, which is a really good team, one that's going to be that you feel really, really good about when they're in tight games. You just have a belief that they're going to be able to pull it out. And that's something that can't be understated or overstated, right? But I don't want everybody to think that everything is perfectly fixed, because this could have gone differently. And it could next weekend.
I said the same thing on my other show, which is this weekend was a lot of fun. There was nothing I came away from this weekend saying it is any different than the team I watched through 34 games, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not seeing some serious regression, right? I would say that regardless of what happens, and I hate to kind of sugarcoat it like this has been a wildly successful first year under Dusty May. I mean, just in terms of what they've done with roster construction, things that have gotten fixed culturally, the player development, and then obviously win the Big Ten tournament. I mean, they were for 95% of the Big Ten season, at worst, the second best team in the conference. They had a very good year, but what makes them vulnerable is going to continue to make them vulnerable. And we'll talk a little bit more about it as we get a bit deeper into this. But you bring up the fact that they've played so many close games. I mean, it was a ridiculous run where they'd won like 7 out of 8 with a minus point differential or something. I mean, it really was. They kept you on your toes. Journalistically, is it more fun to cover a team like that, or is it more frustrating because you don't know what the rhetoric of your post-game reaction is going to be until the final, buzzer kind of sound?
Well, I would say, I mean, since you asked from my perspective, very selfishly, it's very frustrating because I feel I don't get to write any good game stories, right? Like sometimes, like when a story has, like when a game is going a certain way, there's times to like, you can pinpoint a moment and like, that's the moment that I'm going to make my lead, right? Like just paint the picture and then go from there. Every game changes 10 times. There's no moment. There is no moment. It's a tie game. Oftentimes with 2 minutes left, I don't know who's going to win. So am I writing this through a positive lens or through a negative lens, right? And I don't mean negative or positive. I mean, but are we feeling good or are we feeling not good? And so in that regard, it's very difficult. And a lot of time, and in many games, after games, I've had to ask Dusty and the players, to use a phrase we've already used multiple times, I've asked them for a vibe check. I'm like, hey, like, so are we feeling good about this tight win or are we feeling not good about this tight win? Because they've felt differently depending on the game, right? There were times where, like I'd say the Penn State game, probably, they were not very happy. I mean, they're very pleased with Trey Donaldson and him willing that victory in his late 7-0 run, but they were down by 5 to Penn State at home. And it looked like they were going to, like, that might cost them the league, right? Like a little loss like that. Now they won it, but they weren't super pleased afterwards. Whereas, I'd say the tight road win at Indiana, right? Oh, they were pumped. I mean, they were super pumped up. So not all of these games are created equal, and they're all fun when you win them and you get to look back on them. But having to try to have a story ready at the buzzer that sounds or looks coherent, I always feel like I could have done a better job, even though I'm doing my best in the moment.
That's why I couldn't do what you guys do, and I respect what you guys do because it's in written form. And like I have the luxury of just spouting off of the mouth where I just like I would imagine like I get secondhand anxiety of the idea of like that of the delete button on your keyboard as like the team that you think is going to win ends up losing, type of thing.
No, no deleting, Chris. 2 stories.
Nice.
Working on the win, working on the loss. The loss is on the left side, the win's on the right side. And switching between Word docs. Literally, I mean, every game.
That's the way to go. And I think you're right about it. You got to take it on a case by case basis because it's hard to win in this league. And yeah, like some of those close wins, obviously the blow lead against Indiana, still a quality win against what should have been a tournament team. Same against Ohio State. But then you have, I mean, The Nebraska game was just as bizarre a Big Ten basketball game as there's ever been. And I think even Dusty was open about it after the game, which is like, look, I think this is just the anomaly. Like we just got to move on to the next one. It's not going to be pretty. And yeah, I think that was a good point you bring up about the 5 games in 13 days, where it's just, again, to make a baseball analogy, it's kind of like when a player's struggling and you just give them a day off. Like they kind of just need the ability to watch the game for a little bit and reset. And I think that allowed them to. Now, obviously, moving forward, it doesn't get any easier at this point. I talked about it on my other show with the fact that the older, and we're around the same age, the older I get, man, unless you are one of the top 8 teams in the country, meaning you're a 1 or 2 seed, I don't, at this point, I don't view anything as a easy or difficult draw or a difficult draw at this point. I think that all these teams are prepared. Every team can kind of beat the other. At the same time, there are elements of this matchup against UC San Diego that has Michigan fans a little bit concerned, and we'll discuss it. I guess to kind of, start with it though, were you surprised by the draw when you saw him as on the 5 line in Selection Sunday?
I was not, although I disagree with it. I fully disagree with it. I thought they should have been a 4 seed, but I have seen, having done this for, it's kind of amazing off and on, but for the better part of a decade, I've seen this stupid formula happen time and time and time and time again, where there is just not enough runway after the Big Ten tournament or even starting in the semifinal for them to rearrange the brackets. There are so many formulas and metrics and things that have to go into account. And I mean, even so, league teams, right? I mean, when 14 SEC teams are in the tournament, it is so difficult to properly seed them so they don't see each other again. And now I think this time it could have been a very easy flip to put Michigan at that Purdue 4 and Purdue at that Michigan 5. But I'm not. I didn't see how the sausage was made. So I mean, I disagree with it. I think, Michigan won 24 games. They won a Big Ten tournament championship in the second deepest league. They finished in second place in the regular season in the Big Ten conference. But if I'm trying to understand it from the committee's perspective, or like how I would imagine they would explain it, is that pretty much, as we've said, all their wins were tight. A win is a win, so I don't know why that matters that much. But if you're losing convincingly and winning tight pretty much always for 2 months, that doesn't bode that well. And their non-conference didn't help them, right? Losing to Arkansas, losing to Oklahoma, losing to Wake Forest. Their best non-con win is Xavier, maybe, right? It's not that great of a win. And so it's just right now, it feels like Michigan got snubbed. Right? They just beat Purdue, Maryland, Wisconsin, 3 seed, 4 seed, 4 seed. How are you a 5? It feels like that. However, that was 48 hours of a 4-month year. You had the whole season, and you can't flounder. The final 6 games, they were 2-4, and those 2 wins were disgusting. They were disgusting wins, right? So they could have been 0-6 going down. So you have to look at it from both perspectives. I think they were robbed. I think they should have been a 4, and I think they got a really tough draw opposite them on the 12th.
I would agree. This is what kind of annoys me about the committee, and it's the same thing that annoys me. It will annoy me with college football as well, is that the criteria changes year in and year out with this stuff, and they try to act like there's a specific formula that they abide by every year. And no, there isn't. And the other thing too, and this is, I don't know why they don't do this, but just admit that Big Ten championship, that final game is in the tournament, just doesn't matter. Because this is the third. There's probably more instances, but just in this state, this is the 3rd time in which I've seen a team from the state of Michigan win the Big Ten tournament and be by pretty much every metric underseeded. Michigan won it in 2017 when after the plane crash. They were a 7 basically coming into the tournament. They end up winning the tournament and they still remain a 7. Michigan State twice in 16 and 19 won the Big Ten, was like being talked about on Selection Sunday as, okay, well, they're going to be a 1 seed and they end up on the 2 line. I think that you're right. Not a whole lot of runway there. A resume comparison, obviously. It's hard for me to really understand Wisconsin being 2 seeds better than Michigan, considering, the overall record. Michigan beat them twice, but it is what it is. Now you kind of look ahead to UC San Diego, which is, it's tough because obviously who I'm rooting for, but if if I filled out my bracket with my head and not my heart, this would be a very appealing, like 12-5 upset pick. I'm just going to be real. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with UC San Diego, but I've been on that with Michigan all year saying, no matter how this goes, this is a vulnerable team. This is a team with a lot of variance. There's a lot of boomer bust here. But you look at UC San Diego, a team that, is kind of, it has all the hallmarks of a classic, potential March Cinderella team. First year in Division I, they make the NCAA tournament. They've won 15 in a row. They come in hot. Obviously, the big storyline, they're a defense that forces a lot of turnovers. Michigan commits a lot of turnovers, but also like a lot of the teams in this tournament that are mid-majors, somewhat undersized. I guess, where do you see, the potential? How do you see the matchup kind of lining up for Michigan in this game? Are they as dangerous a 12 as people are making them out to be?
I think you broke it down well. Before the bracket came out, the two teams if I was Michigan, that I probably would not want to see were Colorado State and UC San Diego. Yeah. And lo and behold, if they hadn't gotten San Diego, Colorado State was actually the next in line as the 12. But, what you like from Michigan's perspective is there is not a person on the other roster above 6'8". That means even Will Cheddar will have a size advantage, right? And so, not to mention Vlad and Danny, that goes without saying. Right. So you like to think that Michigan should be able to get some work done on the glass. However, one of the scariest elements of any mid-major, upset-minded team in the tournament is one that can shoot. And this is a team that can shoot. Not just pretty well, which they are. They're 57th in the country at 36.5% from 3-point range, which is a really very, very solid percentage. But it is the volume of 3-pointers that they shoot. 40% of their total points come from behind the arc. 41% come from inside the arc, and then 18% at the line. So, half their offense essentially is threes. And if you catch a team like that on the wrong day, we've all seen the Bucknells, the Belmonts, the what have you, that just rain on you, right? And then the real thing is the turnovers. The number 2 team in the nation at forcing turnovers, 23% of possessions. That's between 1 and 5, or out of every 4 possessions you're giving the ball over. And that's Michigan's Achilles heel. So we did touch on it, that they've been able to come plenty of games against plenty of good teams when they did turn it over. You just didn't want to see a team that lives by forcing turnovers and by shooting threes. It's tough. It's just tough. It's tough.
It's tough. And it's like I said, at this point, now that we live in a world where 16 seeds have beaten ones, like there's no safe game in this tournament. But I acknowledge it's a pretty brutal 5-12 matchup. And I also, going back to just kind of the draw, I know the committee, they puff out their chest with this stuff and they look at resumes, but eye test does matter. And Michigan had multiple nationally televised games where they either lost or got boat raced near the end of the season. That, like, Michigan State game was ugly. Illinois game at home was ugly. Losing by double digits at home to Michigan State as well. Like those, I think, those are kind of those tipping points to a certain extent when it comes to that stuff, and why maybe a Purdue or Wisconsin ended up with a higher seed. Do you don't have to share it, obviously. Do you fill out a bracket as a journalist, or is it one of those things where you try to be objective with it and leave it aside?
No. I'll fill out a bracket. I'll probably fill out a couple.
Right.
I'll probably fill out a few. But doing this professionally, I've found that I'm no better than when I did it. Just watching like how we do, just talking ball, Yeah. And I don't think I've always subscribed to, being like some of the best professionals, in my opinion, started as very, very passionate fans, right? You have to start with that care, with that desire, with, and I also don't think that the best necessarily, just because you're a fan does not mean you have to idolize or demonize or what have you. You don't have to have any specific agenda for the team you cover. You just have to want to tell the truth, right? Or inform the fans. And that's where I live. I just want to be right. I'm not always going to be right. I'm probably going to be wrong more than I'm right, but I'm going to do my best to be right? Because that's my job. It's my job to listen to the coaches, listen to the players, check out what they're saying, watch what they do, and then tell the fans who have real lives and real jobs and contribute to society, and then do this for fun. Oh, hey, when you tune into this is what to expect, right? And so no, I mean, I'll still fill it out. I'll tell you, I'll be perfectly transparent. I could see Michigan losing the first game. I could see Michigan losing the second game, and I could see Michigan losing to Auburn. I could see them losing all three of those games.
Yeah.
And then, however, I do feel some type of way about predicting it, just because I know it's not what my readers want to see. I have very good personal connections with the players, with the coaches, right? But that's not my job. It is not my job to make anybody feel good or tell anybody what they want to hear. It is my job to just say what I think is going to happen. And I mean, all the time, don't worry. When I'm wrong, it's right in my email. It takes about 2 minutes, right? It's very quick. And there's dozens, not dozens, but feels like it. So I don't know. I still haven't made my pick for this first game or for Michigan at large. Before I saw their draw, I felt like they could go on a Final Four run. They kind of flipped it. They can win close games. They can match. There's no one style that really, really beats them. They've proved like they matched up with a lot of different teams. But once I saw their draw, I would go as far as to say I would be surprised if they made it past the Sweet 16. I can see them getting to Auburn, but the saving grace is Auburn has to play. I think it's going to be Louisville who will beat Creighton in that opening round, and they're going to have to play them in Lexington, Kentucky. That is 1 hour from campus. That's a road game for Auburn. So if Michigan can be the beneficiary of Louisville topping Auburn, they can go on a run. And I'm not saying that they couldn't beat a Michigan State or Iowa State in that Elite game, 8 game. Getting there is just going to be, it's a nightmare draw. It's 3 really, really hard games to get
for
there.
sure. And that's an interesting point you bring up about Auburn and Louisville potentially. The seeding and the both reverence and disrespect that was shown to the ACC in this tournament didn't make any sense to me. Where you have obviously, look, Duke being a 1 seed, I have no problem with that. I think they'd probably win the whole thing. But North Carolina, I think in my lifetime, I can't recall a single team making the tournament that was met with as much scorn, deservedly, as North Carolina making it this year. There's no one coming to their defense and saying, yeah, you know what, they made the right decision. And yet, so they barely make it in. You have a Louisville team that had a tremendous season. 18-2 in conference, gets an 8 seed. Makes it to the conference finals in their conference tournament. Kind of weird, bizarre seeding. Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up about those two teams playing. I think Auburn, look, they're the number 1 overall seed, so they're not going under the radar against anybody. But I think with the SEC being as good as it was, that little slide they had at the end of the year is not indicative of the team they are. I think that the committee kind of got it right, putting them as the number 1 overall seed. And even Bruce Pearl was open, like, we lost to 3 top 15 teams at the end of the year. Like, it's not, it's not really anything to worry about. You wrote a story that kind of took on a life of its own about Vlad Golden this year and his the relationship with his family. He hadn't seen his family in 5 years. There was a wonderful piece that you did that obviously has been picked up, and he was on The Journey, and it was featured on the CBS with him running into his parents and meeting him at the airport and stuff like that. It was pretty awesome stuff. Did you know, and I've always wanted to ask a journalist this question, do you come into the season knowing that that's a storyline that you might want to dive into at some point, or do you not find out that kind of information until you get deeper into the campaign and get to know these guys a bit better?
Great question. It is both. It's fully both. When Roddy Gale transfers, right, that like at some point there's going to be that sort of thing, or when Dusty May comes and you his history, there's going to be a return to Indiana. But Vlad, I did not know his full story, right? I didn't know about his that he hadn't seen his parents in 5 years, or going from Connecticut to Texas to Florida to Michigan, or that he even left his home to go to Moscow when he was 15 in Russia. So he hadn't seen his parents. They were able to visit, but he wasn't living with his parents for multiple years before he came to the States, right? And so, yeah, you just kind of hear it and pick it up. And I just think that's something that I've done my best. I'm always trying to improve. It's just it's kind of like a light bulb moment. Like when you hear something or see something, if it perks your ears up, then it's going to perk someone else's ears up, right? And like if you think it's unique, someone else will too. And that's not to say that like whatever I think goes, but it's just like use your journalistic sense, right? And it's like, I don't know. I think I was just putting myself in his shoes. Like, I mean, I talk to my mom every day. Like she lives 3 miles away. I could not imagine not seeing my mom for 5 years. And so I was just thinking about like, man, like what a jerk, like just such an unrelatable life, right? Like here's this guy who, I mean, he was wonderful. He had been wonderful to talk to the first couple months, very introspective. I was expecting a little bit of a language barrier. There wasn't. And he always just had really good things to say. And it just kind of made me, like, it just intrigued me to him more. And then when I met Dima Fedosov, the GA, and I started talking with him on court beforehand, he sort of told, like, he was the one who was really spilling to me about his relationship with Vlad and some of the things. I was like, wow, like, this is a crazy story. And then kudos to Michigan's basketball program, Tom Weyer at the SID. Thankful to him we were out in LA. I got to go to the team hotel and we're sitting at the poolside cabanas, just shooting the you-know-what, right, for like 45 minutes or an hour. And that's how you get to really establish these relationships with these players and the coaches. And that is my favorite part of the job. I've covered a national championship, which was sweet. The Rose Bowl was a day I will never forget the rest of my life. But and even, tournaments like this, I'm pumped to go to Denver. We don't know. Michigan can go on a run. I'm not counting it out. But it's the people. It's the people that make this business. And so no, I did not plan that ahead, but you just always got to keep your eyes and ears peeled.
Yeah, and you are. I messaged you this over the holidays, but you were big part of my father's Christmas gift this year with the Michigan football 2023 championship book that you I helped write. I appreciate it. Obviously, that was wonderful, and I gave it to him for Christmas this year. But yeah, and we are going to talk a little bit of football here, but just kind of to bridge the gap. Because they're drastically different sports with different personalities. Do you find one, whether between basketball and football, easier to develop relationships with people in basketball, or is it kind of even? Is there a difference between how you go about covering them?
Oh,
I don't want to put you in a compromised position, but
you're good.
Yeah,
you're good. I'll be sensitive with it. There are very different relationships with the programs. I don't want different relationships with the programs at all. I want to be, here's my goal, my job is to be the insider, right? I think everybody at whatever job you are, whatever job you have, if you're a lawyer, you're a dentist, you are a garbage man, you're a janitor, anything. I think the goal of life is to work as hard as you can and be the best at what you do. And this is my life's passion. This is my life's work. And I want to be the insider, right? Like when something happens with Michigan football or Michigan basketball, ideally that I will have someday earned the cachet in the future where people like you and others go, I wonder what Tony thinks about that, or I wonder what he has said about that. That's the goal. And so I am doing my best to foster relationships with coaches in both programs where they can trust me, where we will have a good relationship, where I can message them, where they can message me. I'm not always going to write what they like, but there's always they can always come to me and they can say and we can. There's just like the freedom of expression both ways. I would say that Michigan football is an elite program that has many national media members that set the narrative, set the discourse, and they get the first bite at the apple, right? And so, and Michigan football, they run things a certain way. They want to. There's no access to practice. There's no access to anyone, to anything. There's a set time. You meet with us here. You speak to these people at these times. We are all together. You can all hear the questions, and then you go, right? I've tried my hardest to have one-on-ones, to sit down, to go behind the scenes, and really work on these relationships because I want these coaches to be able to text me, and they do. We talk. We all talk. Ward and I have a fantastic relationship. I can pick up the phone and call him anytime, any day. Same with the basketball staff. The football, it's just there's been more turnover lately, right?
Right.
That last year was a new staff. Last year was a little bit of a tough season. So I mean, I'm going to give them all the benefit of the doubt. And I've said things that they don't care for. Frankly, I'll be very transparent. And I think maybe that's rubbed them the wrong way a little bit at times. But I haven't done it to be unfair. I haven't done it because I went to Michigan State 15 years ago. That's not what this is about.
I didn't even want to. I'm sure that's brought up to you all the time. Is if it's happened to Baumgartner too, as some sort of scarlet letter. I mean, you've been doing this long enough now, where it's like I don't know how much convincing people need.
Yeah, I know. And I even find myself like even saying the sentence, right? Because I don't even want to give any credence to it, but I also don't want to be ignorant to the fact that it's a narrative. It's it is part of my story. It's a fact. That's where I went. And I felt certain ways when I was a student, right? But what I will say is when I was an 18-year-old student committing to Michigan State, I did not know I was going to be a journalist. I had no intention of getting into this field. I was pre-business. And then I partied too much and didn't get good grades. And then I just fell into my love of sports and writing. And then you just kind of find your passion. Yeah. And then you realize, I mean, like, I've given up a lot for this career, right, Chris? And if anybody thinks I'm going to jeopardize my career for something as stupid as Michigan and Michigan State and my livelihood and what I have worked 12 years for and gone to graduate school for and climbed the ranks for, I can't even bore you with the midnight to 9 a.m. days I had producing news shows in Lansing just to hope to get an opportunity like this. So I could not care less about the Michigan State dynamic beyond how it relates to my job.
It's weird because I talk about both teams on my show and I enjoy talking about both teams on my show, but I think we're kind of in lockstep in the sense that like that part of it, the getting in the mud element of like even the whole court dust up at Breslin. I'm just like, it's just a rivalry thing. It happens. Like people want me to break it down like it's the fucking Zapruder film. Like it's just not. I want to talk about the games. It's just not that important to me at this point. And I think that one of the big downsides of just social media in general is the fact that like I'm not going to call it in this instance cancel culture, but like people just assume that people don't change. Like I'm more than willing to believe that the rhetoric you use now as a journalist is significantly different than what you would have used 10 years ago. The same way that like, I mean, people watching like some of the OG Tiger videos that I used to do were fucking foul. Like things change, people grow and evolve professionally. And I mean, I think you've done a wonderful job with this team. And I know that, and I do want to transition to football a little bit because the last time that we talked was after the Washington game. So at this point in the season, Jack Tuttle was the starting quarterback, and then he retired 2 weeks later. So that's how quickly things change. But speaking of change, the last time I had you on, all the frustrations that we had with the 24 version of Michigan football were legitimate. And then you're 5-5. You clobber Northwestern, which was like, okay, expected to a certain extent, but it was like, all right, you're making a bowl game, so you've avoided a disastrous season, so to speak. Then you go to Ohio State and win. You beat Bama with your second string defense, essentially, and you come away from the season. I've never had a year like this where I just went, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Now, those first 9 games were real, and there wasn't some crazy, bounce of the ball. I knew you had the weird turnovers against Bama, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not like Davis Warren found it and was having this second half like Rudock had in 15, where all of a sudden he's confident and they're, passing the ball 25 times a game and he's efficient. No, in the last 2 games of the season, they just stopped passing because they knew what they had at quarterback. What was the biggest change? Like, what happened that led to this being a team that was having kind of a disastrous championship hangover to being one that legitimately salvaged things in the first year under Sharon Moore?
Less is more. Sometimes less is more. And the defense, Wink Martindale was just, when you are a 20-year NFL vet and then you go down to the college ranks, there's going to be an adjustment. There's going to be a learning curve. 19-year-old kids are not going to pick up on concepts the same way that Eric Weddle did, right? It's just different. It's just different. And so it took some time. You got to think about the people who are, Will Johnson's banged up. Rod Moore's not back there. And then, and the secondary is really where things fell apart. You're asking was it Amir Hall was last year, right? Josh Wallace was the year before. Yeah, Amir Hall.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So you're asking Amir Hall to step up. You're asking Jair Hill to step up. Makari Page needs to be a vocal leader in the secondary, and that is not what he did. That was not his comfort zone. You're moving Zeke Berry in and out of nickel when he hadn't had any experience. You're trying to replace Mikey Sainers still, right? And then, I mean, 2 new linebackers. So the back 7 was completely out of sorts, and they're mixing and matching and zone and man and simulated pressures. They're coming off this edge and they're standing Mason Graham up on the edge on 3rd and 13. It's like, just let him be in the middle of the line. Like, what are we doing here? And eventually it was like, you know what? Let's just go eat. Let's just go eat. And eventually they did. And Ohio State is stupid enough to play right into Michigan's hand. The second worst Ohio State game plan I've ever seen in my entire life. The worst.
Behind 2015
would be 2015 Michigan State. Exactly. You knew where I was going.
Yep.
And here, Chris, this might be my favorite stat that I'm just going to share because I don't know how many years I'm going to be able to share it. I have gone to Columbus 3 times, and Ohio State is 0-3 in the games I covered.
Keep going, Tony.
I
Keep
know.
going,
I know.
please.
I know. I actually put out a message on social media. I'm like, programs can hire me. Like, I will mercenary this, and you can, like, I will find my bye weekend or whatever to go down there and then help Nebraska or whatever.
Right.
But no, but they just, the Bama thing, I got nothing for you. I couldn't even explain. It was just the monsoon, right? It's a monsoon, literally and figuratively in that first quarter. You get up 16-0. And that was how Michigan won all year, right? Yes. Even those early wins, they would get it was when they could play their style of ball, USC, right? Like, and then just kind of hold them off. Minnesota even get a lead, hold them off. It was when they got behind Illinois, Washington. There's more. Yeah, Indiana. Thank you. And they could not come back. They just couldn't muster enough offense. And so yeah, no, Wink simplified things. The defense bought in, and it was just like, I could not believe that after that a 5-5 team after a national championship year that was looking dead in the barrel at the worst post-national championship year of the modern era. Yes. 90% of the way into the year actually leaves feeling like, that could have been worse.
That wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
It was so bizarre. And it's a great point you bring up. And it's why the Michigan State game was weird, because that was the one game where they actually did fall behind and like kind of found a way to rally back. Now, Michigan State kind of did what they do and shot themselves in the foot a lot in that game. But no, you're correct. They didn't have a single pretty win all year. Everything was maybe Northwestern.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably it. Would be the only one where that was like legitimately efficient. But yeah, I wanted that Ohio State game, and I'm glad you mentioned it's. I'm not happy Ohio State won the national championship, but the fact that they did makes that game that much more of a what the fuck to me, because I won't say who, but people can probably guess. I don't think it's that big a deal, but I was talking to a journalist friend of mine who just brought up the fact that in that game, like he came into that week saying, I think Michigan might have a shot, because he thought that Ryan Day was going to do what ended up happening, which is this hubris, this kind of belief of like, we have to out-tough them. We have to prove that we're better on the line of scrimmage. We have to prove that we're more physical, despite the fact that you are totally playing into Michigan's hands in that situation. Was it Wink's, like game plan and kind of baiting Ohio State into running the football and being conservative that led to Michigan being successful? Or was it more so just Ryan Day and Chip Kelly's refusal to use NFL wide receivers against a banged up secondary?
Yeah, I don't want to not give Michigan its due credit for an unbelievable win. Mm-hmm. However, I don't know how you can bait a team, right? Like, you cannot tell another team what to do. And Michigan had been torched through the air, was dominant against the run, and you have the best wide receivers in the country. Why you're not passing the ball is beyond me. Now, it was cold. That was a cold day. It was windy, right? And that's a very underrated element of why, in my estimation, this whole rivalry has flipped. It is so to Michigan, this is not like Michigan's lucky or what. The game's always been played at the end, And both teams can you can build whatever program in whatever image you want. But Ohio State is a sports car. They are glitz and glamour and pizzazz and all of that. And Michigan is a muscle car. They just want to ram you. And when you're playing on November 25th in Michigan or Ohio, let me tell you what that game is going to lend itself to, right? Yeah. If this game was on September 30th, and it's 70 degrees or 68 degrees, I don't think that Michigan wins 4 games in a row. But when you're in these type of like games that lend itself to just being more physical, and you're not going to be able to throw the ball all over the field, well, you're playing right into Michigan's hands. And I have to think that's part of the calculus.
Yeah. And I think, it was such a bizarre game. And I mean, Ohio State, you missed 2 field goals and everything, but still, even with all of the sloppiness, it was just, there's one lack of execution is one thing, but not attempting to execute is another. Like if they were airing it out and Will Howard was just airmailing people, it's like, okay, that's, I guess you got to give Michigan credit. I think Will Howard's one of his first passes being a pick that was returned to the goal line changed maybe the way the rest of that entire game was called to me. Because I think that at that point, there's kind of a here we go again, play not to lose mentality, which is what they played with that entire, really the entire second half of that game. And I was watching, when they got to the playoff, the first drive against Tennessee, they had about 4 explosive plays, with 2 of them being over the top pass plays. And I was watching the game with my dad, and he said they didn't do that attempted once against Michigan. And it's like, it's weird to say it this way, but like, yeah, I think Ohio State would probably admit, like, sadly, that a loss like that had to happen for them to wake up and realize what they were, which is, it's just, I think that the Urban Meyer era spoiled them a little bit, where those teams were not only fast and explosive, they had a level of toughness and physicality on the lines that, no disrespect to Ryan Day, he's a national championship winning coach, I don't think those teams have, compared to what Michigan's been able to grow over the last 4 years. And so they played into Michigan's hands, and obviously kind of there's a correlation here. Michigan football got hot after what was the biggest signing announcement or recruitment announcement that I can remember in my lifetime with Bryce Underwood. I mean, I wasn't as active on Twitter during this time, but it was as if it was a similar reaction to when the Tigers signed Prince Fielder, of like the world stopped for half a second, like, holy shit, we got our guy. And there had been so much talk about, he was staying at LSU, and then it was kind of this surprising commit. But now come the expectations and the decision that Sharon's going to have to make. I think they've played this right, in the sense that he has not been guaranteed the job. You bring in Mikey Keene, who is a capable college quarterback, an experienced college quarterback. But the way that I view this is, and I've seen this happen in Michigan many times to various levels of success, if Mikey Keene wins the starting job, every 3 and out, every interception, and I feel bad for him in this sense, is going to be the chorus of people who are going to be clamoring for Bryce Underwood. And sometimes Michigan fans have been correct in that sense, like when they were clamoring for J.J. McCarthy. Sometimes they've been incorrect, like when they were clamoring for Drew Hendon. Mm-hmm. How do you see this quarterback situation shaping out as we kind of get into the season?
Well, we spoke with Chip Lindsey today for the first time as Michigan starts their spring practices. And you're asking all the right questions. That was exactly what I asked him as well, right? Like, how do you handle this when probably, not from a talent perspective, but from a experience perspective, Mikey Keene certainly has the upper hand going in.
Agreed.
However, from the high end, like the upside, it's night and day with Bryce. And then also there's something to build to. And by the by, who does the biggest fan base in the country? Who are they all clamoring for and dying to see, right? But in the same way that my job is not to be beholden to telling people what they want to hear, the coach's jobs is not to give fans what they want. It is to make the right decision. And that's what Chip said. He's like, look, he said there's no pecking order. There's he does not expect to have a decision by the end of spring. He says the way he's always done it is you want to just know. When you know, and ideally that's what happens, and it just sorts itself out, and they see, and then it can work. But there is a chance for there to be a little bit of I mean, it's a delicate situation, right? Because Bryce Underwood is a true freshman. The second game of the year is at Oklahoma, right? It's going to be, I mean, that's a real welcome to college football sort of moment. And he is as physically ready as any high school prospect could possibly be. Yeah. And by the by, he's 17 years old still. He doesn't even turn 18 until the end of the summer. It's just, I mean, there are some people who are, I mean, you're just born with it, just completely born with it. I mean, there's nothing that he has that you can teach. You can't teach it. He's just one of one. But you want to set this team up for success. And so, so Chip didn't rule anything out. I mean, there have been, I mean, they don't want to go with two quarterbacks because we all know the adage, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. But he understands there's been success with little JJ packages beneath Cade as you're working him in. So could that be an option? Possibly. I think everybody just wants Bryce to win the job. I think everybody wants him to be so overwhelmingly talented and tantalizing that the upside is just too much to resist. And then Mikey Keene is aware. He knows he's not playing in the NFL. He's 5'10". He's not an NFL guy. He wants to be a future coach. And so he can be, I mean, he can help. If he is going to do his best service for this team, it's part of it is taking Bryce under his wing, teaching him the playbook, teaching him the reads, teaching him how to go through progressions and all the things you learn when you're not running a Belleville offense, respectfully, but when you're running a pro-style offense in one of the two deepest leagues in the nation.
Yeah, it's a delicate situation, and it's even more delicate considering the world of college sports that we're in, because and you brought up JJ was used his freshman year, and I thought they used him effectively as a 5-star true freshman. He wasn't making $17 million. And this is where, I mean, I'm not turning down that money, but there is a pressure, maybe an unfair pressure that's going to come with that, with the fact freshmen need to adjust. It's the same way with rookies in baseball or any other sport. And it's I think with the expectation may come the belief that he's just going to step in and look, if he's that good, he's that good. And that could be a game changer for Sharon Moore's really entire tenure going forward. But yeah, man, I mean, I could talk to you all day, and I'm sure we'll talk Tigers maybe a little bit off the air here in a second. But you've done a marvelous job with this. You've been a workhorse. I mean, really the last several years. And I mean, not just saying this because I've known you for a minute, but you are far and away one of my favorite follows on Twitter. You're far and away one of my favorite journalists to follow with the job that you've done. So we'll make sure to plug everything that you're doing. You are we're coming up with tier lists for Chris and Company guests, and so you're multi-time guest now, which I think puts you in all-star form. You're tied with Tarek Skubal and Justin Henry Malloy for most appearances all time. As we go deeper, we're gonna have a Hall of Fame class, and we're gonna have a 5-timers club, assuming this show continues. So I wouldn't have you on if I didn't like you and I didn't think you were doing a great job. So hopefully this basketball team can go on a run and give you more stuff to talk about. But either way, appreciate you coming on to the show as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate that very much, and I hope that is the only time my name is in the same sentence as Tarek Skubal, because it does not belong there.
Yeah. Unless you both get contract extensions at some point. In that case, maybe.
Well, I mean, I can hope to be put in that, but I do not belong in his class. But you do a great job too, and that's why I always love coming on. Appreciate
it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
See you soon, bud.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, awesome. I mean, I could talk to that dude all day. A smart guy, sharp guy. He's done a wonderful job covering both football and basketball over the last few years. And you can tell that this team has definitely kept pretty much every journalist on their toes. I mean, from the people I've talked to, which I get it. I mean, it's been a roller coaster of a year, but a fun year nonetheless. And, for his sake, and obviously for the whole sake of the fan base, and I'll be real, for the sake of our content, I hope that they can go on a little run here. But he's as fair as they come, and as objective as they come with this team. I think that he's had a pretty good beat on him from the beginning. Go back and watch the first interview that we did where he kind of previewed this team, and he was spot on about a lot of different things in the roster construction. Seems like he has a good relationship with the program there. So really looking forward to this run, and I appreciate him coming on. You could check him out on all the socials, find him on X and everything. He's been a workhorse for a minute now, and I've known him. Like I said, I was on his podcast during COVID when he was, I think, working in Lansing as a news reporter. So we've known each other for a minute. Happy to hop on with him then, and appreciate him hopping on now. And it will not be the last time that he's featured on Chris Company. He's done a wonderful job. So, yep, that will do it for today's show at Castellani 2014 on X/Twitter, CastellaniContent.com. There you'll find all of the content that we do in order, perfectly balanced as all things should be. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify and anything else now. We will be back next week. Be the last show before opening day. So we got something fun planned, and I'll leave it at that. I appreciate all the support with the post-game videos and the podcasts as well. I love doing this show, and it's one of those things where I'm very true to what I'm good at, which is talking about sports. And I believe in our product, and I think that the product can grow. And I'm very fortunate that I get the opportunity to interview very smart people like Tony Garcia. So thank you guys very much for jumping on this show. We will talk to you guys next week. You can continue to follow me on Twitter as we do roll out all the post games and all the kind of in-game reaction to things. We will see you next week. Go Blue. Let's make a run. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.
It's an unfair game. We got to think differently.